Shakespeare's history plays are distinguished from his comedies and tragedies. History plays, they rely upon the historically recorded data that can be verified, you can say, in chronicles, archives, and other historical artifacts. But that's, you can say, the mastery of Shakespearean art, that Shakespeare not only presents these plays just recreation of an historical event, or you can say a historical figure. Most of historical most of the protagonists of history plays are either the English rulers, or you can say the famous rulers of Roman Empire, like Julius Caesar. Some of history plays like King Henry VIII, they are joint venture of Shakespeare's works, and this play like Richard III, they are, you can say, exclusively dramatist's own work. These plays also present the conflict, you can say essential dramatic conflict of good and evil. Dramatic conflict of the protagonist's ideals and harsh, hostile world around. There is conflict of, you can say, ambitions and external constraints. These plays also incorporate what we say certain nationalist ideas, and they are more explicitly concerned with British notions of a king. We have discussed these notions in tragedies as well. What should be the king? Tyrant versus popular king. Scholar king, philosopher king, and martial king are, you can say, soldier king. These dimensions are explored. In history plays, these, you can say, choices and their implications are described in more detail. In Shakespeare's history plays, Richard III is very much popular. We can say for, you can say, four different reasons. First reason is persona of Richard III, that is called Hunchback Richard in Shakespearean drama. That Richard didn't exist in reality. I mean, deformity or physical deformity of Richard, which has been added for, you can say, dramatic necessity, or for Shakespeare's own conviction against evil that he added that deformity to character, deformity to, you can say, a controversial king, Richard III. Second, and that you can say concept has caused a controversy. Historical Richard III and Shakespearean Richard III. And there is actually a society that is actually working in modern days in defense of Richard III. There is a Richard III society. Definitely, that's a society of the students of history discipline. And they believe that Shakespeare has unduly defamed a king. So Richard III has been, you can say, popular because of this controversy. Yes. Third is recently, we can say in 21st century, a few years back, Richard III's, we can say, remnants or dead body that have been actually found, because there are certain myths about death of Richard III, and his actually remnants have been found, and he has been buried again. So in contemporary time, that type of interest have also uh, revived interest in Shakespearean literature. Fourth, fourth one, I can say, its comparison with Macbeth. Macbeth is more or less believed, particularly by modern audience, a tragic hero. But Richard III is presented as a villain, an antagonist. He is not a hero at all. Two famous critics, William Hazlitt and A.C. Bradley, have particularly drawn this comparison and discussed both the characters and emphasized that Macbeth deserves to be called a tragic hero, but Richard III does not. So, physical deformity and controversy of Richard III in Shakespearean drama and in historical accounts, death, dead body, and reburial of Richard III, and lastly, comparison of Macbeth and Richard III are reason of Richard III's popularity as play. First, I want
Aslam,
to, yes, yes, you want to say something?
sir, I want to ask a question.
Question? Yes, please.
Sir, the real king means real Richard the Third was henchman or the character of Shakespeare was henchman?
A Shakespearean Richard III is hunchman, not real man.
Okay,
That, being hunch, that is a deformity. Kubda, in modern days, there is a discipline that is called special education. And in special education, or you can say concerned ministries which deal with, um, we can say special or something like, because the even very word special is highly controversial in modern days. They uh, These people uh, claim that moral books are ethical books, and later on you can say literature and films, dramas. They have linked, you can say, a sin, an evil, or vulgarity with physical disability of the person, and they believe that it's unjust and that discriminates a particular segment of society. यानी किसी फिल्म में अगर आपने विलन दिखाना है तो विलन आपने अंधा दिखा दिया, या वो टांगों से जो है वो मजूर है, चल नहीं सकता, लेकिन हर जो बुरे काम में जो है उसका जहन बड़ा चलता है। आप ऐसा फिल्मों में कई दफा जो है वो देख सकते हैं। इसी तरह जो है और कोई ऐसी जो है वो मेरिट जो किसी खास कल्चर में अगलीनेस का कास है। जैसे अगर किसी कल्चर में गोरा रंग जो है वो हुस्न का म्यार है, तो काले रंग वाले को जो है वो विलन दिखाया गया है और गोरे रंग वाले को जो है वो हीरो दिखाया गया है। इसी तरह अगर किसी कल्चर में हाइट म्यार है, जो है वो एक एप्रिसिएशन का सोर्स है, तो उसी कल्चर में जो ठिगना कद है, जो बोना है, गिट्ठा है, उसको जो है वो इवल करेक्टर के तौर पर पेश किया गया है। इसी तरह और भी मतलब कि आप मेरिट्स ले सकते हैं। तो इसके ऊपर जो मतलब मिनिस्ट्रीज ऑफ स्पेशल पीपल, या मैं तो स्पेशल का वर्ड मजबूरी के तहत ही यूज कर रहा हूँ, क्योंकि ये बहुत अब डिबेट है कि उनको स्पेशल ना कहा जाए और उनकी एजुकेशन भी जो है स्पेशल एजुकेशन की बजाय इंक्लूसिव एजुकेशन होनी चाहिए। लेकिन फॉर द सेक ऑफ अंडरस्टैंडिंग, बिकॉज आई एम नॉट फाइंडिंग एनी यू कैन से मोर suitable words, so I am using it. So उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ये बात है कि आपने डिफॉर्मिटी को मोरालिटी के साथ कैसे जोड़ दिया। जरूरी नहीं है कि एक शख्स जो है वो अगर ब्लाइंड है तो वो कमीना भी हो। ये ये सिर्फ एक हाइपोथेटिकल कॉन्सेप्ट है कि हम जो है ताकि लोग उससे नफरत ही करें। हम चाहते तो यही है कि बुराई से नफरत करें, लेकिन हमने उसको एग्रावेट करने के लिए उस करेक्टर में एक फिजिकल डिसेबिलिटी ऐड कर। और मैंने कहा अभी ये बताया कि ये इट हैज बीन अ प्रैक्टिस सिंस एजिस, एंड it continued in Shakespearean world, Shakespearean drama as well. So if Shakespeare has manipulated a character and tried to, you can say, make an ugly figure, and to make an ugly figure, he actually made a deformed man, a man of lust actually has been presented through the character of Richard III. Richard III actually, you can say, was a duke. His kingship, that's a very short while for, you can say, uh, about 9 years in fragments, and in the name of actually uh, patronage of young princes and princesses. So Richard III is a British king, and his time, we can say, that's the end of what we call medieval era. It is thought that uh, successor of Richard III, which was actually Henry VII. Henry VII is thought the beginning of Renaissance age in England. So mostly 1485 is thought the end of War of the Roses, and that's the time when Henry VII actually came into power. War of the Roses, what were these wars? The War of the Roses were a series of English civil wars for the control of the throne of England, fought between supporters of two royal houses, the House of Lancaster, that was represented by a red rose, and the House of York, that was represented by a white rose. तो ये दो शाही खानदान हैं, लैंकास्टर एंड यॉर्क, and you can say kingship was in these two families, and for the sake of throne, these two houses they were entangled in war. Before Richard III uh, era, that was King Edward, and uh, in one way we can say for a short time War of Roses ended, but due to evil of Richard III, these wars you can say re-emerge, and ultimately Henry VII, he had to, you can say, defeat him, and when he became a king, kingship actually was transferred to a third house that is called Scott dynasty. It is thought that these wars eliminated the male lines of both families. In this play, we will see how actually Richard III eliminated his own male successors, his nephews. That conflict lasted through many sporadic episode, you can say random, between 1455 and 1485 or 87. Actually, in 85, King Henry VII invaded, and you can say claimed his kingship, but definitely king needs the time to establish his throne. But there was related fighting before and after this period between the parties, the House of Lancaster and the House of York, each represented by a particular rose. The power struggle ignited around social and financial troubles following the Hundred Years' War, unfolding the structural problems of bastard feudalism combined with mental infirmity and weak rule of King Henry VI, which revived interest in the House of York's claim to the throne by Richard of York. So, Richard III belonged to, you can say, House of York. Henry VI belonged to House of Lancaster, and Edward IV, he was actually brother of Richard. I introduce the characters. Actually, context, or you can say the situation before opening the play is that's the time of peace interval. In fact, the rival, I mean King Henry VI, has been defeated and killed by King Edward IV. At that time, King Edward IV was ruler, and time is, you can say, the second half of 15th century. There was Duchess of York, and Duchess of York is actually mother of King Edward, also mother of Richard III, uh, and Clarence, Duke of Clarence, and George. Okay. King Edward IV has a son. He is also called Edward, but he will be called Prince Edward in the play. And Prince Edward was possible successor to throne. यानी किंग एडवर्ड की डेथ, किंग एडवर्ड is actually bedridden in old age, and that was an assumption that after death of King Edward IV, Prince Edward will be the next king. Right now, that Prince Edward is Duke of York, also Prince of Wales. We can say he has these two powers, these two titles, Duke of York and Prince of Wales. Richard III, George, and Duke, these are three brothers of Edward, King Edward. Richard III is uh, Richard III is Duke of Gloucester. Clarence, Duke of Clarence has a son and daughter. Definitely, they are nephew and niece of Richard III. Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth is actually Edward's wife. Marquis of Dorset, Lord Grey. Lord Grey and Dorset, they are her sons. Anthony Bodwell's, he is Earl of Rivers and Queen Elizabeth's brother. Lady Anne. Lady Anne is actually Prince Edward's widow. In this way, she is Queen Elizabeth's daughter-in-law and King Edward IV's daughter-in-law and Prince Edward's widow. Queen Margaret. Queen Margaret is not part of, you can say, York family. She is Lancaster family, and she is King Henry VI's widow. She is an old lady in play. We can say the oldest figure in this play is Queen Margaret. Sir Thomas Wagham, William, who is Lord of Hastings, William, Lord Hastings, Lord Chamberlain. These are the noblemen in play, or you can say dignitaries. Lord Stanley, who is Earl of Derby, and he is friend of Lord Hastings. Richmond. Richmond is actually Earl of Richmond. Uh, he is son-in-law of Lord Stanley. And He has that power. He is Earl of Richmond. You know, Earl is a higher position after Duke, and he becomes the next king, and he will be called in history Henry VII. Earl of Oxford, actually he supports in mission of Henry VII or Earl of Richmond, and he becomes his follower. Sir James Blunt, Sir Walter Herbert, they are also supporters or followers of Earl of Richmond. Duke of Buckingham, he was first supporter of Richard, but later on uh, he had to leave him. Duke of Norfolk, Sir Richard Ratcliffe, Sir William Catesby, Sir James Tyrrell, they are the you can say nobilities of England which supported Richard III. Francis Viscount Laval, Cardinal John Cardinal is a priest. Bishop of Alais, Sir Christopher, they are also priests. They are also manipulated, used, abused by Richard III. So these are, you can say, the characters. Once again, you can say, keep in mind certain character. Who is Richard III? Who are his brothers? And who are his nephew and niece? I think one character has not been mentioned here. That is Elizabeth Princess, uh, Lady Anne, Prince Edward's widow. Richard III marries that widow, and in a way, that's an incest. Actually, uncle is marrying his real nephew's wife. She also, you can say, gets. She also gives her consent and becomes her wife. But towards the end of the play, Richard tries to marry his own niece, Elizabeth, and that's more, you can say, horrible. And Richard is stopped in this way that Princess Elizabeth is married to Richmond, Earl of Richmond, or Henry VII. In this play, we see after a long civil war between the royal family of York and Lancaster, England enjoys a period of peace under King Edward IV and the victorious Yorks. जैसा कि अभी मैंने आपको बताया कि हाउस ऑफ लैंकास्टर और हाउस ऑफ यॉर्क्स की खून रेस जंगें हुई। इन जंगों में किंग एडवर्ड और उसके भाई यानी कि रिचर्ड क्लैरेंस भी बड़ी बहादुरी से लड़े। खुद लैंकास्टर की तरफ से लास्ट किंग यानी हेनरी सिक्स ने बड़ी बहादुरी से इनका मुकाबला किया था, बट ड्रॉप सीन वाज दैट हेनरी सिक्स वाज मर्डर्ड। हाउस ऑफ लैंकास्टर fell down and they yielded to House of York. The most suitable figure of House of York was the eldest brother, King Edward, who became King Edward IV. But Richard resents Edward's power and the happiness of those around him. You can trace out jealousy and malicious nature of Richard III. Richard resents Edward's power and the happiness of those around him. He is malicious, he is power hungry, he is bitter about his own physical deformity because Richard is thought as a hunchman that causes an ugly impression of his personality. Probably no one likes to have his company, particularly the beautiful women. And that man has a lust for that. Richard begins to aspire secretly to the throne and he decides to kill anyone he has to in order to become the king. First issue was, you can say, the eldest son becomes the king. Because of that norm, Richard could not be a king. Second, Richard lacked the virtue of being a popular king. King Edward IV could manage it, but Richard could not. So King Edward IV has appointed a successor to throne, and that successor to throne is his own son, Prince Edward. In this way, his own brothers are deprived of the right of kingship. Richard knows that he can never be a king if, you can say, the things move on smoothly. So he plans to snatch kingship, and for that purpose, he decides to kill anyone who becomes an obstacle in his way. Using his intelligence and his skills of deception and political manipulation, using his intelligence and his skills of deception and political manipulation, Richard begins his campaign for the throne. You can say typical attributes of evil characters, deception, as we have seen in character of Edmund, Iago, Claudius, and political manipulation, as Edmund makes in King Lear, Claudius makes in Hamlet, or Macbeth makes in Macbeth. Richard begins his campaign for the throne. He manipulates First Lady Anne into marrying him. Even though she knows that Richard III murdered her husband, Prince Edward, Prince of Wales, and Duke of York. तो पहला मर्डर जो रिचर्ड ने किया, रिचर्ड थर्ड ने, वो अपने ही नेफ्यू एडवर्ड का मर्डर. He thought in this way he will attain two, you can say, purpose. He will marry the most, you can say, stunning beauty, Lady Anne, and he will be able to not only satisfy his carnal desires but give an impression to public. The most desirable lady is no his life partner. And second, in this way, he will uh, remove a hurdle in his ambition to be a king, and that is kill the successor of throne. And he killed that successor. Now, his second attempt is to murder his own brother. He murders his own brother, Duke of Clarence, and shifts the burden of guilt onto his sick older brother, King Edward. In this way, that king could not stop the murder. King could not find out the murderer and brought him to justice. And probably king thought that his own brother was a threat to his throne and he arranged his murder. That thing became a guilt for the older king Edward IV that accelerated King Edward's illness and afterward his death. You can imagine the situation that a man who is in his old age, already weak, and he is being uh, brought in a situation to face the death of his son, death of his real brother, and a sense of helplessness. Yes, Faisal. Hello.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, I want to ask a question. If King Edward the Fourth has not killed his brother,